The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty general store in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Willa Calloway descended the steps with a carpetbag clutched in trembling hands, her left eye swollen nearly shut and painted the deep purple of a storm cloud. It was late May in 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the growing frontier town. But Willa barely noticed the heat as she stood on unsteady legs, trying to remember how to breathe without feeling like her ribs might crack all over again. She had traveled 3 weeks to reach this place, sleeping in fits and starts, jumping at every sound, and now that she was finally here, she had no idea what came next. The stage driver pulled down her trunk without meeting her eyes, and Willa understood that look well enough by now. People did not want to get involved, did not want to ask questions about how a woman came to look like she had been trampled by horses. She paid him the extra coins she could barely afford and watched him drive away, leaving her standing alone on the wooden sidewalk with everything she owned in the world beside her. Sioux Falls was larger than she had expected, with buildings stretching along both sides of the main street, and the sound of hammering echoing from somewhere nearby where new construction was underway. The Big Sioux River flowed just beyond the buildings, and she could hear its rushing water even from where she stood. Willa had no connections here, no family waiting, no job arranged. She had simply pointed to a map and chosen the first place that seemed far enough away that Robert would never find her. Her legs felt weak, and she sat down heavily on her trunk, not caring how it looked. The world swam in and out of focus, and she realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten anything more substantial than stale bread. Her ribs ached with every breath, souvenirs from Robert's boots when she had been on the floor 3 weeks ago. She touched her face gently, feeling the tender flesh around her eye, and fought back the tears that threatened to spill over. "Madam, you all right there?" The voice was deep and concerned, and Willa's head snapped up so fast that pain shot through her neck. A tall man stood a few feet away, his hat in his hands, his face creased with genuine worry. He wore the dusty clothes of someone who worked with cattle, his boots worn but well made, and his sun-bronzed face showed he spent most of his time outdoors. His dark hair was longer than fashionable, and his eyes were the color of creek water, a shifting green-brown that seemed to take in everything at once. "I am fine," Willa said automatically, the lie so practiced it came out smooth despite how obviously untrue it was. The man did not move closer, seeming to sense that proximity would frighten her, but he did not walk away either. "Name is Grant Owens. I run a ranch about 5 miles outside town. You just get in on that stage," Willa nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with the kind of face that looked honest in a way she had almost forgotten existed. He was not looking at her with pity exactly, but something softer, something that made her chest ache in an entirely different way than her bruised ribs. "You got somewhere to stay?" Grant asked, and when she shook her head, he nodded as if he had expected that answer. "The boarding house is full up this week with folks coming through for the land sale, but there is a hotel 2 buildings down. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She is good people." "I do not have much money," Willa admitted, the words barely above a whisper. She had enough for maybe a week of room and board if she was careful, and then she would need to find work, though who would hire a woman who looked like she had picked a fight with a wildcat and lost? She could not imagine. Grant shifted his weight, turning his hat in his hands. "The hotel runs reasonable, and if you are looking for work, the restaurant attached to it could use help. The previous waitress just got married and moved to her husband's homestead." Willa wanted to ask why he was being kind to her, what he expected in return, but the words would not come. She had learned the hard way that kindness always came with a price, that soft words turned to hard fists when you least expected it. But she was too tired and hurt and hungry to refuse help, even if it meant owing someone. "Thank you," she managed, and started to stand. The world tilted sideways, and she would have fallen if Grant had not dropped his hat and caught her elbow, steadying her with a grip that was firm but careful. "When did you last eat?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that reminded her of her father, dead these 10 years, who had been gentle and good before the fever took him. "I do not remember," Willa admitted. Grant picked up his hat and dusted it off, then reached for her trunk. "Come on. Let us get you settled and fed. Everything else can wait." Willa wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own, but her body betrayed her with its weakness. She followed Grant down the sidewalk, clutching her carpet bag, very aware of the curious stares from other townspeople. She kept her head down, letting her hair fall forward to hide her face, but she could feel their eyes on her anyway. The hotel was a 2-story building with a wide front porch and windows that actually looked clean. Grant held the door open for her, and she stepped into a front room that was blessedly cool after the heat outside. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind a desk, her expression shifting from pleasant to concerned the moment she saw Willa's face. "Grant Owens, what have you brought me?" the woman asked, but her tone was kind rather than accusatory. "This is, well, I do not believe I caught your name, madam," Grant said, looking at Willa. "Willa Calloway," she said, forcing herself to meet Mrs. Patterson's eyes. She saw the older woman take in her bruised face, her careful way of moving, the fear that probably showed in every line of her body. "Willa needs a room and a meal," Grant said. "I told her you might have work available in the restaurant." Mrs. Patterson came around the desk, moving slowly as if approaching a spooked horse. "I have a room on the 2nd floor, faces east so it catches the morning light. As for work, we can certainly discuss that once you have rested. You look like you have been through a considerable ordeal, dear." The kindness in her voice nearly broke Willa. She had been holding herself together through sheer stubbornness for 3 weeks, and now these 2 strangers were being gentle with her, and it made all her carefully constructed walls start to crumble. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of them. "I can pay for the first week," Willa said, reaching for the small purse she kept tied under her dress, but Grant held up a hand. "Let us discuss payment after you have eaten and rested," he said. "Mrs. Patterson, could you bring up some food?" "Whatever is easiest." "I have beef stew on the stove and fresh bread," Mrs. Patterson said. "Come with me, dear. Let us get you upstairs." Willa followed the older woman up a narrow staircase, each step sending fresh pain through her ribs. The room Mrs. Patterson showed her was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the street. It was the nicest place Willa had stayed in months, maybe years. "The washroom is at the end of the hall," Mrs. Patterson said. "There is hot water in the mornings and evenings. I will bring up that food directly and then you should rest." When the older woman had gone, Willa sank onto the bed and let herself shake. She had made it. She was here, wherever here was, and she was away from Robert and his fists and his rage. The relief was so intense it made her dizzy, and she lay back on the quilt, staring at the ceiling, trying to make her racing heart slow down. True to her word, Mrs. Patterson returned within minutes with a tray laden with a bowl of stew that smelled like heaven, thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, and a cup of coffee that steamed invitingly. She set it on the small table by the window and turned to Willa with a look that was equal parts firm and compassionate. "I do not know what you are running from, and I will not ask," Mrs. Patterson said. but you are safe here. Grant Owens is one of the best men I know, and if he brought you here, that means he thinks you need help. Let us help you, Willa Calloway. You do not have to do everything alone." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice, and Mrs. Patterson left her to her meal. The stew was the best thing Willa had tasted in recent memory, rich and thick and filling, and she ate every bite despite how her stomach protested at the sudden abundance of food. When she had finished, she undressed carefully, wincing at every movement, and washed as best she could with the water in the pitcher. Her body was a map of bruises in various stages of healing, yellow and green and purple marks that told a story she wished she could forget. She pulled on her nightgown and crawled into bed, and despite telling herself she would only rest for a few minutes, she fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. When Willa woke, the light outside her window was the golden color of late afternoon, and she realized with a start that she had slept for hours. She sat up carefully, taking stock of how her body felt. Still sore, still aching, but the rest had helped more than she wanted to admit. She dressed in her least wrinkled dress, a plain brown calico that had seen better days, and pinned her dark hair back carefully, trying to make herself look presentable despite the spectacular bruise that still decorated half her face. Downstairs, the restaurant attached to the hotel was beginning to fill with early dinner customers. Mrs. Patterson was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a group of men who looked like ranch hands, and she looked up when Willa descended the stairs. "There you are, dear. Feeling any better?" "Yes, thank you," Willa said. "I wanted to ask about the work you mentioned. I am not afraid of hard work, and I can start immediately if you need me." Mrs. Patterson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "The dinner rush will start soon. Why do not you watch this evening, see how things work, and if you think you can handle it, you can start tomorrow morning. The work is steady, the hours are long, but I pay fair and you get meals included." Relief flooded through Willa. "That would be wonderful, thank you." She spent the evening watching Mrs. Patterson and her cook, a cheerful man named Tom who made jokes while he worked the stove. The restaurant served simple but hearty food, the kind that working men wanted after a long day, and there was a steady stream of customers. Willa paid attention to how Mrs. Patterson greeted each person by name, how she remembered who liked their coffee black and who took sugar, how she kept orders straight in her head without writing anything down. As the sun set and lamps were lit throughout the restaurant, the door opened and Grant Owens walked in, his hat in his hands again. He spotted Willa immediately and made his way over, moving carefully through the crowded room. "Miss Calloway," he said, nodding politely. "I wanted to check on you, make sure you are settling in all right." "I am, thank you," Willa said, very aware of how inadequate those words were to express her gratitude. "Mrs. Patterson has been very kind. She's going to let me work here." Grant's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from merely handsome to something that made Willa's breath catch. "That is good news. She runs a fine establishment and you will be in good hands." He stood there for a moment, seeming like he wanted to say more but unsure how to proceed. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "I know you do not know me from Adam and you have got no reason to trust anyone right now, but I meant what I said earlier. Both that I and whatever broke inside you, both will heal here. This is a good town with good people and you are safe now." The words hit Willa right in the chest, making her eyes sting with unshed tears. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt almost as much as her bruises. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, needing to understand. Grant was quiet for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands again, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his way of thinking. "My sister," he finally said, his voice low enough that only Willa could hear. "She married a man who hurt her." By the time I found out, by the time I got to her, it was too late. She died from injuries he gave her, and he disappeared before the law could catch him. That was 5 years ago, and I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone in her situation, I would. So that is why. No other reason, no payment expected. Just trying to do what I could not do for Emma. Willa's hand went to her mouth, her eyes wide. I am so sorry. Me too, Grant said simply. But maybe some good can come from it if I can help you get back on your feet. He settled his hat back on his head and nodded to her. I will be in town again in a few days. If you need anything before then, you can send word out to the ranch with any of the hands. The Owens Ranch, about 5 miles due west. He left before Willa could respond, and she stood there watching the door close behind him, feeling like something fundamental had shifted inside her chest. Grant Owens was helping her because of his sister, because he had learned too late what happened when good men did nothing. The weight of that, the grief behind it, made her want to cry all over again. The next morning, Willa woke before dawn and dressed carefully in the same brown calico. Her eye looked slightly better, the swelling reduced enough that she could open it fully now, though the bruise was still vivid against her pale skin. She made her way downstairs as the sky was just beginning to lighten and found Mrs. Patterson already in the kitchen with Tom, preparing for the breakfast rush. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, looking pleased to see her. "Ready to start?" "Yes, madam." The work was harder than Willa had anticipated, her sore ribs protesting every time she lifted a heavy tray or reached for something on a high shelf. But it was honest work, and the customers were mostly polite, and nobody asked questions about her face. She learned quickly, memorizing orders and faces, figuring out the rhythm of the kitchen and dining room. By the time the breakfast rush ended, she was exhausted but felt better than she had in months. The days began to blur together in the best possible way. Willa worked from dawn until evening, serving food and cleaning tables, and slowly building up her strength. Mrs. Patterson was patient and kind, never pushing too hard but also expecting quality work. The older woman had given Willa the room at a reduced rate in exchange for extra cleaning duties around the hotel, and Willa had accepted gratefully. She learned the names of the regular customers, learned which ones left good tips and which ones tried to get handsy until she fixed them with a cold stare that made them reconsider. She learned that Sioux Falls was a growing town, positioned well near the river and attracting homesteaders and businessmen alike. The railroad was coming, everyone said, and when it did, the town would explode with growth. Grant Owens came into town 3 days after their first meeting, and Willa's heart did an odd little jump when she saw him walk through the door. He took a seat at the counter and ordered coffee and eggs, and when she brought them to him, he asked how she was settling in. "Well," Willa said, and realized it was true. Her body was healing, the worst of her bruises fading to yellow, her ribs no longer screaming with every breath. "Mrs. Patterson has been wonderful. The work is good." "You look better," Grant said, and there was no judgment in his tone, just observation. "Getting some meat back on your bones." Willa had to smile at that. "Tom keeps making sure I eat. He says I look like a strong wind could blow me over." "He is not wrong," Grant said, but gently. "You need building up. Healing takes time and food and rest." They talked for a few more minutes, easy conversation about the weather and the town and nothing that mattered at all. But Willa found herself relaxing around him, found that his presence did not make her anxious the way most men did. When he left, he paid for his meal and left a generous tip, tipping his hat to her as he walked out. "That man has been sweet on you since he first laid eyes on you," Mrs. Patterson said from behind the counter, startling Willa. "He is just being kind," Willa protested, but her cheeks felt warm. Honey, I have known Grant Owens for near about 10 years since he first came to this territory. He is not just being kind. Oh, he is that too, do not get me wrong. But the way he looks at you, that is something more. Willa did not know what to say to that. The idea of any man being interested in her seemed impossible, especially looking the way she did. And even if Grant was interested, she was not ready for that. Might never be ready for that again. The thought of letting someone close, of being vulnerable with another man, made her stomach turn with fear. But as the weeks passed and May turned to June, Willa found herself looking forward to Grant's visits to town. He came in twice a week, sometimes 3 times, always finding an excuse to eat at the hotel restaurant. They talked about small things at first, safe things. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle he raised and the horses he bred. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about her parents who had died when she was 20, about her love of reading even though she had few books. He never asked about her bruises, never pressed her for the story of how she came to arrive in Sioux Falls looking like she had been beaten half to death. She was grateful for that, for the way he let her be without demanding explanations. But slowly, carefully, she found herself wanting to tell him. Found herself trusting him in a way she had not trusted anyone in years. It was a warm afternoon in mid-June when everything changed. Willa was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, and Grant was nursing a cup of coffee at the counter, telling her about a problem he was having with a particularly stubborn bull. The door opened and a man walked in, and Willa looked up automatically to greet him. The words died in her throat. Robert. He looked the same as he had 3 weeks ago, tall and handsome in the way that had first drawn her in, his dark hair carefully combed, his suit expensive. But Willa could see past the facade now, could see the cruelty in the set of his mouth, the possessiveness in his eyes as they locked on her. "There you are," Robert said, his voice pleasant enough that anyone listening would think he was greeting a beloved wife. "I've been looking everywhere for you, darling." Willa could not move, could not breathe. The room felt too small, the air too thin. This could not be happening. She had been so careful, had covered her tracks, had paid cash for everything so there would be no trail. How had he found her? "I think you have made a mistake," Grant said, standing up from the counter and moving to place himself between Willa and Robert. His voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel that Willa had never heard before. "The lady does not seem to know you." Robert's pleasant expression flickered, annoyance flashing across his face before he smoothed it away. "This is my wife. She ran away after a little disagreement, but I have come to bring her home." "I am not your wife," Willa said, and was proud that her voice only shook a little. "I was never your wife, and I am not going anywhere with you." Robert's eyes hardened. "Now, Willa, do not be difficult. You know you belong with me." "The lady said no," Grant said, and though he had not raised his voice, there was something in his tone that made every man in the restaurant look up. "I think you should leave." For a moment, Robert looked like he might argue, might cause a scene. But he must have realized that the odds were not in his favor, not with Grant standing there looking immovable and half a dozen other men watching with interest. His handsome face twisted into something ugly for just a moment, and Willa saw the real man beneath the polished exterior. "This is not over," Robert said quietly, looking directly at Willa. "You are mine, and I always get what is mine." He turned and walked out, and the moment the door closed behind him, Willa's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Grant had not caught her, his arm strong and steady as he lowered her into a chair. "Breathe," he said softly. "Just breathe. He is gone." "He found me," Willa whispered, her whole body shaking. "I do not know how, but he found me. He will not give up. He will not stop until he takes me back or kills me." Grant knelt in front of her chair, his face level with hers, and waited until she met his eyes. "Listen to me. You are not going anywhere with that man. I do not care what he thinks he owns or what rights he believes he has. You are under my protection now, and so help me God, he will have to go through me to get to you." "You do not understand," Willa said, tears streaming down her face now. "He is dangerous. He will hurt you. He will hurt anyone who gets in his way." "Let him try," Grant said grimly. "I am not some helpless woman he can push around. And you are not alone anymore, Willa. You have got me, and Mrs. Patterson, and half the men in this town who would stand up for you if asked." Mrs. Patterson appeared with a glass of water and pressed it into Willa's shaking hands. "Grant is right, dear. We take care of our own here, and you are one of us now. That man sets foot in my establishment again, and I will take a skillet to his head." Despite everything, Willa almost laughed at the image of Mrs. Patterson attacking Robert with a cast iron pan. But the fear was still there, cold and heavy in her stomach. Robert did not make idle threats. If he said he would take her back, he meant it. That evening, after the restaurant had closed and the last customer had left, Grant walked Willa upstairs to her room. He had stayed the entire afternoon, sitting at the counter and reading a newspaper, but she knew he had really been standing guard. Now he stood in the hallway outside her door, his hat in his hands again. "I know you are scared," he said quietly, "but I need you to tell me everything. Who is he? What did he do to you? How bad is the danger?" Willa sank onto the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. She had not told anyone the full story, had been too ashamed, too afraid. But Grant deserved to know what he was getting into by helping her. "His name is Robert Kensington," she said finally. "I met him in Chicago, where I was working as a seamstress after my parents died. He was charming and attentive and made me feel special. We courted for 3 months before he asked me to move in with him. I said I would only do that if we were married, and he said we did not need a piece of paper, that we were married in our hearts." She paused, the shame of her own foolishness burning through her. "I believed him. I moved into his house, and for a few weeks everything was wonderful. Then I found letters from another woman, and when I confronted him about it, he hit me for the first time. Told me I had no right to question him, that I was his property, and I should be grateful he kept me." Grant made a low sound in his throat, but he did not interrupt. "It got worse after that," Willa continued. "He would be sweet and apologetic after he hit me, would promise it would never happen again, and I would believe him. I kept thinking if I could just be better, quieter, more obedient, he would stop. But nothing I did was right. He kept me isolated, would not let me work or have friends. The beatings got worse. 3 weeks ago, he broke my ribs and gave me this black eye because his dinner was not hot enough." She looked up at Grant, needing him to understand. "I knew if I stayed he would eventually kill me. So I waited until he passed out drunk, and I took what money I could find and left. I thought I was careful. I thought I covered my tracks, but he found me anyway." Grant was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with barely controlled anger. "He is not your husband. He has no legal claim on you, and even if he did, no man has the right to do what he did to you." "The law does not see it that way," Willa said bitterly. "A woman who lives with a man who shares his bed, she has no rights." "No one would believe me even if I tried to report him." "Maybe not in Chicago," Grant said. "But this is Dakota territory. Things are different here. The law is newer, and the men who enforce it are more likely to judge based on what is right rather than what is written in some old book." He moved closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "Tomorrow I am going to talk to Marshal Hendricks. He is a good man, and he will want to know there is someone in town making threats." "What if that makes things worse?" Willa asked. "It will not," Grant said with certainty. "Right now, Robert thinks he can just walk in and take you. We need him to understand that is not going to happen. that you are not alone and defenseless anymore. That night, Willa barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made her jump. Every creak of the building made her heart race. She kept imagining Robert breaking down her door, dragging her out into the night, and no one hearing her scream. By the time dawn broke, she was exhausted and terrified. But when she went downstairs, Grant was already there, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee, looking like he had been there for hours. He probably had been, she realized. He had stayed all night to make sure she was safe. "Morning," he said, standing when he saw her. "How did you sleep?" "Not well," Willa admitted. There was no point in lying when she knew the dark circles under her eyes told the truth. "I talked to Marshal Hendricks already this morning," Grant said. "He's going to keep an eye out for Robert, and he has deputies watching the hotel and the stage station. If Robert is still in town, we will know about it." The day passed in a strange kind of tension. Willa went through her work mechanically, her eyes constantly darting to the door, expecting Robert to walk through it at any moment. But he did not come, and as the evening wore on, she started to relax slightly. Maybe he had left town. Maybe Grant's threat had been enough to scare him off. She should have known better. It was full dark when Willa went out the back door of the hotel to throw scraps to the pigs kept in a pen behind the building. She heard the footstep behind her too late, and then Robert's hand was on her arm, spinning her around. "Did you really think you could get away from me?" he hissed, his grip bruising even through her sleeve. "Did you think some cowboy could protect you?" Willa tried to pull away, tried to scream, but Robert's other hand clamped over her mouth. "We are leaving," he said. "Right now. I have a horse waiting and you are coming with me. If you make a sound, I will kill anyone who tries to stop us. Do you understand?" Willa nodded, terror making her compliant, and Robert started to drag her toward the shadows at the edge of the property. Her mind raced, trying to think of something, anything she could do. She could not go with him. She knew if he got her on that horse, she was dead. Let her go. Grant's voice came from the darkness, calm and cold. Robert spun around, pulling Willa in front of him like a shield. "This is none of your business, cowboy. This is between me and my woman." "She is not your woman," Grant said, stepping into the light spilling from the hotel's back door. "And you are making it my business by putting your hands on her." "I will break her neck right here," Robert threatened, and Willa felt his grip shift to her throat, felt his fingers start to squeeze. "Back off, or I swear I will do it." "No, you will not," Grant said, and there was something in his voice that made even Robert hesitate. "Because the moment you do, I will kill you, and I am a much better shot than you could ever hope to be." For the first time, Robert seemed to realize that Grant was not bluffing. His grip on Willa's throat loosened slightly, and in that moment, she drove her elbow back into his stomach as hard as she could. Robert grunted and his hands fell away, and Willa stumbled forward. Grant caught her and pushed her behind him in one smooth motion, putting himself between her and Robert. "You have got one chance," Grant said. "Leave Sioux Falls tonight and never come back. If I see you around Willa again, if I even hear that you are in the territory, I will hunt you down myself. And I promise you, Robert Kensington, you will not like what happens when I find you." Robert looked between them, and Willa saw the calculation in his eyes. He was trying to figure out if he could take Grant in a fight. Then Marshal Hendricks appeared from around the corner of the building, a shotgun in his hands, and Robert's face went white. "I believe the man asked you to leave," the marshal said pleasantly. "And I am inclined to agree with him. We do not take kindly to men who hit women in this town. So you have got two choices. You can leave peaceful-like, or I can arrest you for assault and you can spend the next few months in a cell waiting for trial. Your choice." Robert's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Willa thought he would fight anyway. But he must have realized he was outnumbered and outgunned. "This is not over," he said, looking at Willa. "You belong to me." "No," Willa said, and her voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "I never belonged to you, I belong to myself. And if you ever come near me again, I will kill you myself." Robert looked shocked that she had spoken up, had dared to threaten him. Then his face twisted with rage, but Marshal Hendricks stepped forward with the shotgun, and Robert thought better of whatever he had been about to do. He turned and disappeared into the darkness, and a few moments later they heard hoofbeats fading into the distance. Willa's legs gave out again, but this time Grant caught her and simply held her, his arms strong and warm and safe. She buried her face in his chest and finally let herself cry, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. He did not tell her to stop or that everything was fine. He just held her and let her fall apart, one hand stroking her hair gently. "It is over," he murmured. "He is gone. You are safe now." "How did you know?" Willa asked when she could finally speak again. "How did you know he would come for me?" "Because I know men like him," Grant said grimly. "They cannot stand to lose control. I have been watching the back door all evening just in case. When I saw him grab you—" His arms tightened around her. "I have never been so scared in my life." Marshal Hendricks cleared his throat. "I will have my deputies keep watch for the next few days, make sure he does not double back. But Grant is right, Miss Calloway. You are safe now. That man knows he has got no friends here." When they finally went back inside, Mrs. Patterson took one look at Willa and insisted she take the next day off. Willa wanted to argue, but she was so tired she could barely stand. Grant walked her upstairs again, and this time he waited while she locked her door from the inside. "I will be right outside," he said through the wood. "Try to get some sleep." Willa wanted to tell him he did not need to do that, that she would be fine. But the truth was she did not want to be alone, and knowing he was just on the other side of the door made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, and this time when she closed her eyes, she actually slept. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of birds singing outside. For a moment she could not remember where she was or what had happened. Then it all came rushing back and she sat up, her heart pounding. But the fear that had been her constant companion for so long felt different now. Lighter somehow. Robert was gone. She had stood up to him and he had left. There was a soft knock on her door. "Willa, it is Grant. Mrs. Patterson sent up breakfast." Willa wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and opened the door. Grant stood there with a tray, looking tired but smiling. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Better," Willa said and realized it was true. "Did you really stay outside my door all night?" "I did," Grant admitted. "Figured you could use the peace of mind. Besides, the floor is not that uncomfortable." He was lying, she could tell, but the fact that he had done it made something warm bloom in her chest. She took the tray and set it on her table, then turned back to Grant. "Thank you for everything. For believing me, for protecting me, for not asking for anything in return. I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Grant said seriously. "I told you before both that I and your broken spirit would heal here. I meant it. You do not owe me anything, Willa." "What if I want to owe you something?" Willa asked, the words out before she could stop them. "What if I want to know you better, spend time with you, figure out if this feeling in my chest when you are around means what I think it means?" Grant went very still, his eyes searching her face. "What do you think it means?" "I think it means I am starting to care about you," Willa said quietly. "And that terrifies me, because the last man I cared about nearly killed me. But you are not him. You have shown me over and over that you are kind and patient and good. So maybe, if you are interested, we could take this slow, see where it goes." Grant's face broke into a smile that made him look years younger. "I would like that very much. and we can take it as slow as you need. I am not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, Willa and Grant did exactly that. He came into town almost every day, sometimes just to sit at the counter and talk to her while she worked, sometimes to take her on walks along the river when she had time off. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, their fears. Grant told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 18, about coming west with his sister Emma to start fresh. He told her about building the ranch from nothing, about the hard years when drought nearly killed all his cattle, about the satisfaction of making something with his own hands. Willa told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her father who had been a schoolteacher and her mother who had made the best apple pie in 3 counties. She told him about how lonely she had been after they died, how desperate for connection, and how that desperation had made her vulnerable to Robert's manipulations. "I was so stupid," she said one evening as they sat on the riverbank watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You were not stupid," Grant said firmly. "You were grieving and alone, and he took advantage of that. That makes him a predator, not you stupid. I should have seen through him sooner. Maybe. But you did see through him eventually, and you had the courage to leave. That is what matters." Grant picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. "My sister did not have that courage, or maybe she did not have the opportunity. I will never know. But seeing you stand up to that man last month, telling him you belong to yourself, that is one of the bravest things I have ever witnessed." Willa felt tears sting her eyes. "I was terrified." "Bravery is not about not being scared," Grant said. "It is about being scared and doing it anyway." As June turned to July, Willa found herself healing in ways that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. Her bruises had long since faded, her ribs no longer ached, but the internal wounds were taking longer. She still jumped at loud noises, still had nightmares sometimes where Robert was dragging her back to Chicago. But Grant was patient, never pushing her faster than she was ready to go. Their first kiss happened on a warm July evening when Grant had taken her on a picnic outside of town. They had eaten Mrs. Patterson's fried chicken and fresh bread, and then Grant had taught her how to skip stones across the river. She was terrible at it, and they were both laughing. And then suddenly he was looking at her with such warmth in his eyes that her breath caught. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the fact that he asked rather than just taking made her heart swell. "Yes," Willa whispered, and when his lips met hers it was gentle and sweet and nothing like the demanding, possessive kisses Robert had forced on her. This was a question, not a command, and when Grant pulled back he was smiling like she had given him the greatest gift in the world. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I think I have been since the moment I saw you step off that stage. I know it is too soon and I do not expect you to say it back, but I needed you to know." Willa touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "And it scares me to death, but I do not want to run from it. I want to see where it goes." "Then that is what we will do," Grant said, and kissed her again. August brought scorching heat, and the news that the railroad would definitely be coming through Sioux Falls within the year. The town was buzzing with excitement and speculation about what that would mean for business. Grant started talking about expanding his ranch, about breeding better quality cattle to sell when the railroad made shipping easier. "Come see it," he said one morning when Willa was pouring his coffee. "The ranch, I mean. I have been talking about it for months, but you have never seen it. Take Sunday off and let me show you." Willa had been wondering when he would ask, and she realized she wanted to see his home, wanted to understand that part of his life. "All right. Yes, I would like that." Sunday dawned clear and beautiful, and Grant arrived at the hotel in a wagon with a good horse hitched to it. Willa climbed up beside him, wearing her best dress, and they headed west out of town. The land rolled gently, covered in prairie grass that waved in the breeze, and in the distance, Willa could see a line of trees that marked where the river cut through the territory. The ranch was bigger than Willa had expected, with a sturdy two-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and horses ran in a separate corral. Grant helped her down from the wagon and led her first to meet his ranch hands, 3 men who worked for him and lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. "This is Willa," Grant said, and the warmth in his voice made it clear she was more than just a friend. The men tipped their hats respectfully and welcomed her, and Willa could see in their eyes that they approved of Grant's choice. The house itself was simple but well built, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living space and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Grant showed her around, clearly proud of what he had built, and Willa could see why. Everything was neat and well maintained, and there were little touches that showed someone who cared about his home. "It is beautiful," Willa said honestly. "You have built something really special here." "I always hoped I would have someone to share it with," Grant said, watching her carefully. "After Emma died, I threw myself into the ranch. It became my whole life. But since meeting you, I have started thinking about the future differently. Started imagining what it could be like to have someone waiting when I come home at night, to share meals with, to build a life with." Willa's heart was pounding. "Grant, I am not asking you to decide anything today," he said quickly. "I just want you to know what I am thinking about, what I am hoping for, if you feel the same way." "I do," Willa said softly. "Feel the same way, I mean, but I am still scared. What if I am not good at this? What if I cannot be the partner you need?" Grant took her hands in his. "You already are. You are strong and brave and kind. You work hard and you do not give up even when things are difficult. Those are the things that matter, Willa. The rest we can figure out together." They spent the rest of the day at the ranch, and Grant showed her everything. He introduced her to his favorite horse, a big bay gelding named Thunder, and taught her how to approach cattle without spooking them. They ate lunch sitting on the porch, and Grant told her stories about learning to be a rancher, about all the mistakes he had made in the beginning. As the sun started to set, and they prepared to head back to town, Grant pulled something from his pocket. It was a small wooden carving of a horse, beautifully detailed despite its small size. "I made this," he said, sounding almost shy. "I whittle sometimes in the evenings. I thought you might like it." Willa took the carving, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It is beautiful, thank you." "It is a reminder," Grant said. "Horses are strong, but they can be broken by harsh treatment. But with patience and kindness, they become loyal partners. I think people are the same way. You were broken by harsh treatment, but you are healing. And when you are fully healed, you are going to be magnificent." Willa could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded and tucked the carving carefully into her pocket. On the ride back to town, she leaned against Grant's shoulder and his arm came around her, holding her close. She felt safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. September brought cooler weather and the first hints that winter would eventually come. Willa had been in Sioux Falls for 4 months now, and the town truly felt like home. She had friends among the other shopkeepers and residents, and everyone knew she was Grant's girl. No one ever asked about her past or why she had arrived looking like she had been beaten. They just accepted her as one of their own. Grant had started talking more seriously about the future, about marriage and building a life together. Willa found that the idea did not frighten her the way it once would have. She had seen how Grant treated her day after day, with respect and kindness and patience. She trusted him in a way she had never trusted anyone. It was a crisp evening in late September when Grant asked her to take a walk with him along the river. The leaves on the cottonwood trees were starting to turn gold, and the air smelled like autumn. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, hand in hand, until Grant stopped at a spot where the river curved and the water reflected the sky like a mirror. "Willa," he said, turning to face her, "I have been thinking about how to do this, what to say, but I realize there is no perfect way. So I am just going to be honest." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple gold with a small stone that caught the light. "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a family with you, face whatever comes together. Will you marry me?" Willa looked at the ring, at Grant's face, at the hope and love shining in his eyes. A few months ago, she would have said this was impossible, that she could never trust another man, never let someone close enough to hurt her again. But Grant had proven over and over that he was nothing like Robert, that his love was the kind that healed rather than harmed. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Grant's whoop of joy echoed across the water, and then he was spinning her around, both of them laughing. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, and when he kissed her, it was with a passion that made her knees weak. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Safe and exciting all at once, built on trust and respect and genuine affection. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the church in Sioux Falls. Mrs. Patterson stood up with Willa, and Grant's ranch hands were there, along with half the town it seemed. Marshall Hendricks gave Willa away, which felt fitting given how he had helped protect her from Robert. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Grant kissed her, Willa felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was held at the hotel restaurant, with food and music and dancing. Willa wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, pale blue calico with white lace trim, and Grant wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. They danced until Willa's feet hurt, and then Grant swept her up into his arms and carried her out to the wagon amid cheers and good-natured teasing. The ride out to the ranch felt different now, knowing she was going home as Grant's wife, that this was the start of their life together. Grant kept one arm around her the whole way, and when they arrived at the ranch house, he insisted on carrying her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. Their wedding night was gentle and patient, Grant taking his time to make sure Willa felt safe and loved. He was careful with her, asking permission, checking that she was comfortable, and when they finally came together, it was nothing like her experiences with Robert. This was two people sharing something beautiful, giving and receiving pleasure, building intimacy through tenderness. Afterward, lying in Grant's arms in the big bed that was now theirs, Willa felt tears slide down her cheeks. Grant noticed immediately and raised himself up on one elbow, concerned. "Did I hurt you? Are you all right?" "I am better than all right," Willa said, smiling through her tears. "I am happy. I did not think I could ever be this happy again, and I am just overwhelmed." Grant gathered her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve all good things, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." Willa settled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt something in her chest that had been tight and painful for years finally loosen. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. The first year of their marriage was full of learning and growing together. Willa threw herself into becoming a rancher's wife, learning how to manage the household, how to help with the cattle when extra hands were needed, how to ride horses well enough to be useful. Grant was patient with her mistakes and enthusiastic about her successes, and together they built a partnership that was stronger than either of them alone. The ranch hands had initially been uncertain about having a woman around, but Willa won them over quickly. She was a good cook, which they appreciated, but she also did not shy away from hard work. When calving season came in the spring and everyone was working around the clock, Willa was right there beside them, helping pull calves and doctoring the ones that were sickly. In May, almost exactly a year after Willa had first arrived in Sioux Falls, she realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first she thought it was just stress or a change in routine, but when another week passed and she started feeling queasy in the mornings, she began to suspect. Mrs. Patterson confirmed it when Willa made an excuse to go into town and visit the older woman. "You are pregnant, dear," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile. "How do you feel about that?" Willa did not know how to explain the mix of emotions churning inside her. Joy, yes, and excitement at the thought of giving Grant a child. But also fear because bringing a baby into the world was dangerous, and the thought of something going wrong terrified her. "Mostly happy," Willa said finally, "and scared. Is that normal, completely normal, Mrs. Patterson assured her. "Every woman feels that way with her first, but you are strong and healthy and Grant will take good care of you. That baby is lucky to have you both as parents." That evening, Willa waited until after dinner to tell Grant. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, something that had become their nightly ritual, and Willa turned to him nervously. "I have something to tell you," she said, "and I hope you will be happy about it." Grant looked at her with immediate concern. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." "At least, I do not think so. I am pregnant, Grant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment Grant just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face split into the biggest smile Willa had ever seen, and he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby." "We are having a baby. Willa, that is incredible. That is the best news I have ever gotten." "You are happy?" Willa asked, needing to hear him say it. "I am over the moon," Grant said, pulling back to look at her face. "Are you happy? Are you scared? What do you need from me?" "I am both," Willa admitted. "Happy and scared in equal measure. But mostly I am grateful. Grateful that I get to do this with you, that our baby will have a father who is good and kind. When I was with Robert, I was so scared of getting pregnant because I knew what kind of father he would be. But with you, I know our child will be loved and protected and raised right." Grant kissed her gently. "Our child is going to be so lucky to have you as a mother. You are the strongest person I know, Willa. You survived things that would have broken most people, and you came out the other side with your capacity for love intact. That is remarkable." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down, and Grant fussed over her constantly. He brought her dry toast and ginger tea, held her hair back when she was ill, and never once complained about the extra work he had to take on when she was too weak to help. As her belly grew and the sickness finally faded, Willa found herself enjoying the experience more. She loved feeling the baby move, loved seeing Grant's face light up when he put his hand on her stomach and felt the kicks. They spent evenings planning for the baby's arrival, fixing up one of the spare bedrooms as a nursery, arguing good-naturedly about names. "If it is a boy, we should name him after your father," Grant suggested. "Thomas is a good name," Willa agreed. "And if it is a girl, what about Emma?" Grant said quietly. "After my sister, if you do not mind." Willa took his hand, seeing the old grief in his eyes. "I would be honored." "Emma is a beautiful name, and it would be a way of remembering her." The baby came in late January, during a snowstorm that made it impossible to get the doctor from town. Mrs. Patterson had come out to the ranch a week earlier to stay until the baby was born, anticipating this might happen, and she served as midwife with a capable efficiency that calmed everyone's nerves. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Willa thought she might die from the pain. But Grant stayed with her the whole time, letting her squeeze his hand until she thought she might break his bones, talking to her softly, reminding her to breathe. And finally, after hours of work, Willa heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and placing him in Willa's arms. A healthy, beautiful boy. Willa looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face and shock of dark hair, and felt love unlike anything she had ever experienced. This was her child, hers and Grant's, a new life they had created together. She looked up at Grant and saw tears streaming down his face as he gazed at their son. "Thomas," Grant said softly. "Thomas Owens. He is perfect, Willa. You did such a good job." The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Thomas was a hungry baby who seemed to wake every 2 hours to eat, and Willa was constantly tired. But Grant helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, giving Willa time to sleep and recover. As winter gave way to spring, and Thomas grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby, Willa found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare with Robert, beaten down and hopeless. Now she was a wife and mother, living on a beautiful ranch with a man who loved her and treated her with respect, raising a son who would grow up knowing what a good marriage looked like. One evening in April, when Thomas was 3 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Grant and Willa sat on the porch as they had done so many times before. The air was warm and smelled like growing things, and the setting sun painted the prairie in shades of gold. "Do you remember when you first arrived?" Grant asked, his arm around Willa's shoulders. "You stepped off that stage with a black eye and a broken spirit, and I told you both would heal here." "I remember," Willa said softly. "I did not believe you at the time. I thought I would never heal, never feel safe again." "But you did," Grant said. "You healed and you thrived and you built a whole new life. I am so proud of you, Willa, so grateful that you trusted me enough to let me be part of that healing." Willa turned to look at him, at the face she loved more than anything except their son. "You saved my life, not just by protecting me from Robert, but by showing me what love should look like. You taught me that I deserved to be treated with kindness, that my voice mattered, that I was worth something. You gave me back myself." "You always had that inside you," Grant said. "I just helped you remember it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear Thomas starting to fuss, and Willa started to rise, but Grant stopped her. "I will get him," he said. "You sit and enjoy the evening." Willa watched her husband disappear into the house and emerge a moment later with their son in his arms. Grant settled back onto the porch beside her, rocking Thomas gently, and Willa leaned against his shoulder with a contentment that went bone deep. This was her life now. This was her family. And she would never take a single moment of it for granted, would never forget how lucky she was to have escaped Robert's cruelty and found Grant's kindness instead. She had arrived in Sioux Falls broken and afraid, but she had healed just like Grant promised she would. Both her black eye and her broken spirit had mended, and in their place was something stronger and more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. As Thomas fell back asleep in Grant's arms and the prairie night settled around them, Willa sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. She had been given a second chance at life, at love, at happiness, and she was determined to make the most of every precious day. The years that followed were full and rich, with all the joys and challenges that came with building a life together. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair, and when he was 2 years old, Willa found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the autumn of 1881 they welcomed a daughter they named Emma, just as they had planned all those years ago. Emma was the opposite of her brother in temperament, quiet where Thomas was boisterous, careful where he was reckless. She had Grant's smile, though, and watching her father's face light up whenever he held her made Willa's heart full. Grant was an involved father in a way that was unusual for the time, changing diapers and giving baths and reading stories even after long days working the ranch. The ranch itself continued to prosper. The railroad had indeed come to Sioux Falls in 1879, and with it came easier ways to ship cattle to market. Grant expanded his operation carefully, never overextending but always looking for opportunities. By 1883, the Owens Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory, and other ranchers started coming to Grant for advice. Willa had found her own place in the community as well. She had a gift for healing, and when someone in the area was sick or injured, they often sent for her. She learned about herbal remedies from the Dakota women who lived on the reservation nearby, and combined that knowledge with what Mrs. Patterson had taught her. She delivered babies and set broken bones and nursed the sick, all while raising her own children and helping run the ranch. In 1885, Thomas started school in Sioux Falls, making the 5-mile journey each day with Grant or one of the ranch hands. He was bright and curious, constantly asking questions about everything he saw. Emma would start school the following year, though she was more content to stay home and help her mother with the household tasks. That same year, Willa received a letter that made her blood run cold. It was from a lawyer in Chicago, informing her that Robert Kensington had died. He had been killed in a bar fight, stabbed by another man in an argument over cards. The lawyer was contacting her because Robert had listed her as next of kin, and there was a small amount of money and personal effects to be claimed. Willa sat at the kitchen table with the letter in her shaking hands, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, that Robert was truly gone and could never threaten her or her family again. But also a strange kind of sadness for the waste of a life, for the man Robert might have been if he had been capable of controlling his demons. Grant found her there and read the letter over her shoulder. He did not say anything at first, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she processed the news. "I should feel something more," Willa said finally. "Happiness that he is dead, maybe, but I just feel empty." "That is because you have moved on," Grant said gently. "He has been part of your past for a long time now, not your present. Learning he is dead does not change anything about your life today." "I suppose you are right," Willa said. She folded the letter and put it away, deciding she wanted nothing from Robert's estate. Whatever money or belongings he had could go to someone else. She did not want any part of that life touching the new life she had built. As the years continued to pass, the Owens family grew and thrived. In 1887, Willa gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel. He was a happy, easy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to watch his older siblings with wide, curious eyes. Thomas, now 8 years old, was proud to be a big brother again and took his responsibilities seriously. Emma, at 6, was more interested in playing with her dolls than helping with the baby, but she loved Samuel in her own quiet way. Grant often told Willa that she had given him everything he had ever wanted. A home full of love and laughter, children to carry on his legacy, a partner who stood beside him through good times and bad. But Willa knew the truth was more complicated than that. Yes, she had given him those things, but he had given her just as much if not more. He had given her safety when she was in danger, patience when she was healing, love when she thought she would never trust anyone again. Their marriage was not perfect. They had disagreements like any couple, moments of frustration when the work was hard or money was tight or the children were particularly challenging. But they had built their relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection, and that carried them through the difficult times. Grant never raised his voice in anger, never used his size or strength to intimidate. When they argued, they talked it through, listening to each other's perspectives until they found a solution they could both live with. In 1889, Dakota Territory became two states, North Dakota and South Dakota, and Sioux Falls found itself as a major city in the new state. The town had grown enormously since Willa first arrived 11 years earlier, with new businesses and houses and even talk of establishing a college. Grant was asked to serve on the town council, a position he accepted reluctantly because it meant time away from the ranch and his family. But he believed in the importance of good governance and wanted to help shape the future of their community. Willa found herself hosting gatherings at the ranch, dinners for other ranchers and their wives, meetings of the Ladies' Aid Society, even the occasional dance in their large barn. She had come a long way from the terrified woman who had stepped off the stage all those years ago, and she took pride in her role as a respected member of the community. Nobody who knew her now would ever guess what she had survived, the darkness she had crawled out of to build this life. The children continued to grow, each developing their own personality and interests. Thomas, as the eldest, had started helping more with the ranch work, learning how to brand cattle and mend fences and all the other skills he would need to eventually take over from his father. He was good with the animals and seemed to have inherited Grant's patience and steady temperament. Emma surprised everyone by showing a gift for drawing and painting. Willa encouraged this talent, saving money to buy her daughter proper art supplies from the catalog. Emma would spend hours sketching the landscape, the animals, her family, capturing moments in ways that made Willa's heart ache with their beauty. Samuel, the youngest, was the most social of the three children. He made friends easily, and was always organizing games and adventures with the other children at school. At 7 years old, he already showed signs of being a natural leader, and Grant joked that Samuel would probably end up as a politician or a preacher, someone who worked with people rather than animals. In the spring of 1892, when Willa was 34 years old and had been married to Grant for nearly 15 years, she realized she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was unexpected, as she had thought her childbearing years were likely over. But she welcomed the news, even though it meant she would be an older mother with a newborn when her oldest child was already a teenager. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, perhaps because Willa was older or perhaps just because every pregnancy is different. She was tired all the time and her back ached constantly. Grant took over more of her usual responsibilities and hired a girl from town to help with the housework. Thomas and Emma stepped up as well, taking on more chores without being asked. The baby, another boy they named James, arrived in December during the first major snowstorm of the winter. The birth was difficult, and there were scary moments when the midwife thought they might lose either Willa or the baby. But both survived, though the experience left Willa weak and recovering for weeks afterward. Grant was terrified during those weeks, hovering over Willa constantly, convinced he was going to lose her. She had to reassure him over and over that she was getting stronger, that she just needed time. And eventually she did recover, though she knew her body had been through something major. The midwife told her privately that she should not have any more children, that another pregnancy might kill her. Willa accepted this news with mixed feelings. She loved her children and would have welcomed more, but 4 was a good number, and she was grateful for the family she had. James proved to be a colicky baby who cried for hours every evening, and Willa often found herself walking the floor with him late into the night, exhausted but determined. Grant took turns when he could, and even Thomas would sometimes take his baby brother and walk with him, singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed the fussy infant. As James grew out of the colicky stage and became a happier baby, life settled back into a more manageable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, the children continued to grow, and Willa found herself often pausing during her busy days to reflect on how blessed she was. Every time she looked at her husband, at their children, at the life they had built together, she marveled at how different things could have been. In 1895, Thomas turned 16 and announced he wanted to attend the agricultural college that had been established in Brookings. Grant was proud but also sad to see his eldest preparing to leave home. They discussed it as a family and decided that Thomas would attend for 2 years, learning modern ranching techniques and animal husbandry, then return to the ranch to eventually take over from Grant. Emma, now 14, had been asked by the schoolteacher if she would be interested in helping teach the younger children. She had a gift for patience and explanation, and the younger students responded well to her gentle manner. Emma loved the work and began talking about becoming a teacher herself one day, perhaps even going to the normal school to get her certificate. Samuel, at 12, was discovering an interest in mechanics and how things worked. He was constantly taking things apart and putting them back together, and Grant encouraged this by bringing home broken equipment for Samuel to practice on. They talked about the possibility of Samuel learning blacksmithing, or even working with the new automobiles that were starting to appear in the bigger cities. James, at 3 years old, was still too young to show clear interests, but he was already the most adventurous of the children, climbing everything and afraid of nothing. He kept Willa on constant alert, sure that he would manage to injure himself with his reckless curiosity. That summer, Willa turned 37 and Grant turned 45. They celebrated with a picnic by the river, just the two of them while the children stayed home with the ranch hands. It was rare for them to have time completely alone anymore, and they savored it, talking and laughing and remembering their early days together. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked as they lay on a blanket watching clouds drift across the blue sky. Taking on a woman with so much baggage, so many problems, Grant rolled onto his side to look at her, his expression serious. "Never, not once. You were not baggage, Willa. You were a gift. You are still a gift every single day. Even when I am tired and cranky and have spit up on my dress." Willa teased. "Especially then," Grant said, making her laugh. "You gave me everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, a partnership. I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You made me want to live again, made me remember why I was working so hard to build something. Because I wanted to share it with you." Willa touched his face, feeling the lines that time had etched there, the gray showing at his temples. "I love you. I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I can express. You saved me, Grant, not just from Robert, but from myself. You showed me I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Grant said. "I just happened to be there when you needed someone, but you did the hard work, the healing, the growing. I am proud of you every single day." They kissed there in the summer sunshine, 17 years after they had first met, and the love between them was just as strong as it had been at the beginning. Maybe stronger, actually, because it had been tested by time and trials and had only deepened. The years continued to unfold, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Thomas did well at agricultural college and returned home with new ideas for improving the ranch. He also returned with a sweetheart, a young woman named Catherine who he had met at school. They were married in the spring of 1898, and Thomas and Catherine moved into a house Grant had built on the far end of the ranch property. It was wonderful having the young couple close by, and Willa looked forward to the day when they would have grandchildren. Emma completed her teacher training and took a position at the school in Sioux Falls. She was beloved by her students and respected by the other teachers. She also caught the eye of the new pastor, a kind young man named Daniel who courted her properly and asked Grant's permission before proposing. They married in 1900, and Emma moved into the parsonage in town while continuing to teach. Samuel, showing the same determination that characterized all of the Owens children, apprenticed himself to a blacksmith in Sioux Falls and showed real talent for the work. He talked about eventually opening his own shop, maybe specializing in the new horseless carriages that were becoming more common. James, the baby who would always be the baby even as he grew into a lanky teenager, showed academic promise and talked about becoming a lawyer. Grant and Willa encouraged all their children to pursue their interests and supported their dreams, even when those dreams took them away from the ranch. In 1902, Thomas and Catherine welcomed Grant and Willa's first grandchild, a daughter they named Willa Catherine after both her grandmothers. Holding her tiny namesake in her arms, Willa felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. She was 44 years old, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her hands showing the wear of years of hard work. But she had never been happier. Grant, at 52, was still running the ranch with Thomas's help, though he had slowed down slightly and let his son take on more of the heavy work. He spent more time with his grandchildren, taking them on walks and teaching them about the land and the animals, passing down the knowledge he had accumulated over decades. One evening in late summer, Willa and Grant sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun set over the prairie. They were alone, the children all grown and living their own lives, though they visited often. The house felt too quiet sometimes, but it also felt peaceful, like they had entered a new phase of their life together. 24 years, Grant said suddenly. That is how long it has been since you stepped off that stage. Willa thought back to that terrified woman with a black eye and a broken spirit, could barely recognize herself in that memory. It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else. In a way it did, Grant said. You are not that woman anymore. You grew into someone new, someone stronger. We both did, Willa said. You were not the same man at the end of that first day either. We grew together, built something neither of us could have managed alone. Grant reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in the familiar, comfortable way of long partnership. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Not one moment. Even the hard parts, the scary parts, because they led us here. To this porch, watching another sunset, Willa said with a smile. To this life, Grant corrected. To these memories, this family, this love. I told you that first day that you would heal here. What I did not know was that you would heal me too. I did not even realize I was broken until you showed me what wholeness felt like. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. They sat that way until the stars came out, until the prairie night wrapped around them like a blanket. This was her life. This was her reward for surviving, for being brave enough to leave Robert, for trusting Grant when every instinct told her that men could not be trusted. She had arrived in Sioux Falls broken and afraid, and she had healed just as Grant promised. Both her black eye and her broken spirit had mended, replaced by strength and joy and love so deep it felt infinite. And as the years continued to pass, as their children gave them more grandchildren, and the ranch was eventually passed down to Thomas, as Grant's hair turned white and Willa's hands became gnarled with age, they remained each other's constant. They grew old together on that ranch, surrounded by the family they had created, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. When Grant died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Willa mourned him deeply, but also felt gratitude for the 38 years they had been married, for every moment they had shared. She lived another 5 years after his death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, passing away in the same room where she had given birth to all 4 of her children. Her last thoughts were of that first day in Sioux Falls, of seeing Grant for the first time and hearing him say those words that would change her life forever. Both her black eye and her broken spirit had healed, just as he promised. But more than that, she had found home, found love, found purpose. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built something beautiful, and she left the world knowing she had lived fully and loved deeply. The Owens family continued for generations after Willa and Grant were gone, building on the foundation they had laid, carrying forward the values they had instilled. The ranch remained in the family for decades, a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose love over fear, healing over bitterness, hope over despair. And while the details of Willa's escape from Robert and her arrival in Sioux Falls eventually faded into family legend, the essential truth remained. She had arrived broken and had been healed. She had arrived afraid and had found courage. She had arrived alone and had built a family. And all of it, every good thing that followed, could be traced back to one moment on a dusty street when a cowboy had looked at a battered woman and seen not her brokenness but her potential, and had promised her that she would heal. Both her black eye and her broken spirit had healed in Sioux Falls, just as Grant had said they would. But more than that, her heart had healed, her soul had healed, her very self had been restored. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all.